Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order and recognize that tonight's meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. We have a transfer of items to the open meeting agenda to section 14.2, Strategic Plan and Long Range Facilities Plan. Are there any additions to the agenda? Deletions to the agenda? Any changes in order? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda. Trustee Stanley, Trustee O'Neill, all in favor? Unanimous. So we'll move on to the approval of minutes from the regular board meeting on September 26, 2018. Was there any changes or additions to those? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Trustee Barron, and seconded by Trustee Wilkinson. All in favor? Moving on to the regular board meeting minutes held on October 24th. Was there any changes or additions to those minutes? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Trustee Robinson, seconded by Trustee Wilkinson. All in favor? Unanimous. Moving on to the special board meeting held October 24th, 2018. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, we'll entertain a motion. Trustee Keller, seconded by Trustee Berzovich. All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to the inaugural board meeting minutes held on November 5th, 2018. Was there any changes or additions to those? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Trustee O'Neill, seconded by Trustee Barron. All in favor? Thank you. Unanimous. Moving on to the Section 72 report, October 24th. Need a motion to approve, please. Trustee Robinson, seconded by Trustee Wilkinson. All in favor? Unanimous. So announcements and reminders. Education Committee meeting will be held on December 5th at 6 p.m. Our Business Committee for December will be December 12th at 6 p.m. Regular board meeting December 19th, and our last day of classes before winter vacation will be December 21st. We don't have any presentations this evening, so we'll move on to the correspondence section of the agenda.
Can I just make a statement? The live stream's not working.
Yes, you may.
The live stream's not working, just so people know.
Thank you, Trustee Higginson.
Sorry.
Some of your best stuff, too.
Yeah, that's too bad. I was really on point there.
Motion redo.
11.1, that the Board of Education of School District 68 refer the above correspondence SOGI 123 program to be received and filed. Get a motion, please. Trustee Stanley. Second from Trustee O'Neill. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. 11.2, letter regarding request for toy drive help. That the Board of Education of School District 68 refer the above correspondence request for toy drive help to staff for response. Need a motion. Trustee Stanley, seconded by Trustee Kimler. All in favor? Keller. Sorry, I knew I was going to do that at some point. My apologies. All in favor? Unanimous. Your names are too similar, I'm sorry.
Okay, shit.
So, moving on to 11.3. That the Board of Education of School District 68 refer the above correspondence regarding graffiti at Rutherford School to staff for a response. Take a motion. Trustee Stanley, and seconded by Trustee Robinson. All in favor? Thank you. It's unanimous. 11.4. That the Board of Education of School District 68 refer the above correspondence regarding the funding model review to be received and filed. Entertain a motion. Trustee Keller, seconded by Trustee O'Neill. All in favor? Thank you. It's unanimous. Trustees' own reports will be something that our board has decided to move forward with. However, this month we are going to wait until next month once our zone assignments have been announced this evening. So moving on to committee reports. We have nothing to report from the Education or Business Committee. And that takes us to section 14, senior staff reports. I invite Director of Facilities and Planning, Pete Sabo, to the podium. Lectern, I guess.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Pete Sabo, and I'm the Director of Planning and Operations. And I was asked to come tonight to do a bit of a facilities departmental slideshow, and it's a bit of a mix of different issues in facilities, and hopefully it'll be of interest and can get some discussion started. If you have questions, please feel free to interrupt during the discussion, and we'll try and follow the thread and answer all your questions. Get started, just a little bit of an interview. The Director of Planning and Operations, and under the Office of the Director, there's a number of departments, if you will, in the facilities department itself. And so we look after maintenance, maintenance, operations, transportation, energy management, and planning. Those are the main sort of departments underneath, and some description of what each of those do. Tonight I'm going to focus a little bit on planning, capital AFG, school projects, and touch more on the other departments probably as we approach the budget process for next year. Or of course, if there's any questions about those along the way, I can answer those as well. So we're talking tonight about the long-range facility plan, and George mentioned the 5-year capital plan, and he mentioned the timing of the two for this year. I wanted to talk a bit about, so long-range planning as it affects facilities for planning and space condition. Of course, that guides our capital planning and our asset management planning. And it helps us when we put together our ministry capital programs under the 5-year capital plan submission. So we have a 5-year capital plan, and we actually update it every year. And so that updated plan is due June 30th. And if the long-range plan was completed prior to June 30th, we would look to incorporate and align the 5-year capital plan with all the details in the long-range capital plan. If the long-range plan isn't completed, then there's certainly information and threads out of the discussion up to date that staff can incorporate on the board's behalf into that plan. Staff bring the 5-year capital plan to the board for approval prior to submission. So you'll see that. You'll see that in June and information leading up to June. Tonight I want to focus a little bit on sort of short-term, short-range planning, which is more out of the operating budget, AFG, local capital, talking about space needs, portable provision, portable relocations, etc. So I'll touch a little bit on that to get oriented. So in planning department, this isn't a complete list of what we do, but there are a number of different functions that we take care of in planning. There's planning for capital, there's planning for the annual facilities grant itself, and then of course we have, and you can take a look at these, I won't go through them in detail, and then of course we do planning for maintenance. Maintenance records, as-builts, different things that our maintenance department requires. So quite a wide range of duties in the planning department. I want to talk tonight a little bit about elementary capacity, and I got a chart for you to take a look at to help drill down a bit on what George was talking about. And the chart that I'm going to show you talks about permanent classrooms, meaning not portables, but permanent classroom space, versus the number of divisions we have at elementary, to give you a sense of how over-enrolled we are, if you will, in the elementary system. In elementary, we talk about an agreed nominal capacity. So the agreed nominal capacity is what we agree with the ministry the size of that school is. And instead of talking about enrollments, meaning that school can fit 325 students, I talk about it in terms of classrooms themselves. So I talk about it in terms of a school having 7 rooms as part of its agreed nominal capacity. Trying to avoid a little bit the actual number of students in the school, because the capacities of rooms can now vary due to composition. So whereas one school you might have an average of 18 or 19 students per class, in another school in the district you might have 20 or 21. If you apply that to the same number of students, you'll end up with a different number of rooms or a different capacity in the school. So it's a currency that we like to use. We have 339 capacity rooms in elementary. We have 393 divisions. And so we are essentially operating at 116% capacity in the school district. Pardon me?
Sorry. Could you repeat the percentage, please?
Approximately 116% in elementary. And so here we have a chart. I think the whole thing fits on. So lots going on this chart. So the blue are the number of classrooms, agreed nominal capacity of classrooms available per facility at elementary. And so that's the blue. And the red is the number of divisions for that facility. And it's not laid out alphabetically. It's laid out by the size of the school. So if you just focus on the blue lines, you'll see that the blue lines are increasing. They go level, they increase, they go level. So they're increasing in size of the school, and if they're level, those facilities have the same capacity in classrooms. And it's a different way to look at it. Driving by, you can't tell the capacity of a school. You just get a sense. You think it's a big school, you think it's not a big school, but this actually tells you how many rooms there are. So you can see that just a quick glance tells you that most of our schools are over enrolled. And so this was also affected by the class size composition, where you might have a school the same enrollment in 2016, in 2017 suddenly it had 2 more classrooms. Yes.
So through the chair, how many of our elementary classrooms were over enrolled prior to the Supreme Court ruling? Do we have any kind of estimate on that?
I don't have that. I don't have that data.
Thank you.
I can't answer it quite specifically, but we did go from a situation where that graph would have essentially looked even or under to now it's looking over. Yeah. You will see as well that there are a few schools that are essentially operating under capacity. I think I know them by heart: Gabriola, Ladysmith Intermediate, and Seaview. Most others are either dead on capacity or slightly over. I'll pause for any more questions on this slide.
Is this presentation available?
Yes, I'll email it to Karen. Yeah, and my apologies, I was working on it right up to just a few minutes ago.
Trustee O'Neill? Trustee Rosich?
Just out of curiosity, how close is Seaview to Castle?
So if you take a close look, it appears Seaview is one room off of capacity.
Trustee Robinson?
We're at 116% capacity. Have you any idea that 16%, how many students would that translate to? Approximately?
I haven't done that math. And again, it varies per school, and I'm not sure we have an average number of students per class district-wide. I don't have that number, so that's how I would do the math on that.
Yes, Trustee Hanson, go ahead.
For North Oyster, is that French immersion that's got it so over enrolled, or is it that the English stream has increased as well in the area?
So through the chair, the chart reflects the total enrollment of the school, and the school was under enrolled before French immersion was moved to the school, but I couldn't tell you in the last few years which growth has been the highest. I don't have that information available to me, but it could be provided.
Trustee Keller?
Question for staff. So when we say number of classrooms available, will that include things like multi-purpose rooms, music rooms, or is it strictly established classrooms?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Probably I don't have enough time to answer it in the depth that's required. The agreed nominal capacity is based on a ministry space standard. So the ministry has published space standards in which they determine if you were to build a new school, how many rooms would you get? Would you get a multi-purpose room, a library, etc.? And for a certain capacity, how many classrooms you would get. Some of our schools were built under that space standard, so they match the space standard quite accurately. Other schools, the space standard was applied to the building retroactively. And that's where some of the magic comes in. And in the year 2000, we went through a program with the Ministry of Education, and we adjusted a lot of our schools' agreed nominal capacity to the new space standard. To be quite specific, it does exclude from the count core areas, which would be library, multi-purpose room, special ed rooms, rooms such as that. So these are pure classrooms. These are classrooms that you can hold a teacher and a number of students in and teach class.
Thank you.
So for instance, I believe every one of these schools would have another room in the school that's a multi-purpose room. Every school would have a library separate from these numbers. Okay. So then district-wide, we currently have 82 portables. And you can see here that they're broken down by portable usage. We have approximately 67 that are used directly to support enrollment at elementary and secondary. There's a number of ancillary district use storage outside agencies, some unusable. If you flip over to the other side, you can see the portable condition chart. You can see that of the 82, we have 11 that are new or refurbished. We have 68 that are 1990s vintage or older. So quite 30-year-old portables. They're supposed to be, people get the idea they're short-term. They're actually more portable than they are short-term. However, you can see that our stock of portables are, we have quite a few that require refurbishment into the future.
Trustee Barron, thank you for the chair. Do we have any numbers around how many of those portables have running water?
Now you're drilling down further than the information. So interesting, you should ask that as well. We hadn't had a program to have running water in portables in the past. We had other priorities. Yeah. We have a detailed portable inventory with condition, and we report yearly to the Ministry of Education.
With the portables in our asset management plan, or just in general perhaps, what's the anticipated lifespan of the portables we have?
The anticipated lifespan of our portable, it's a difficult question to answer. We don't retire portables. We typically haven't retired them. So when they get in a condition such that they need some upgrading, we will refurbish them. The only portables we've retired in the last few years has been those that have been damaged irreparably due to fire or something, yeah. Or termites.
Thank you.
So in 2017, we did a number of space-related projects, and we received funding from the ministry in support of the SCC implementation. And Trustee Robinson indicated the number of rooms that we had to refurbish or add. We received approximately $4.9 million, and in that we had a number of new portables that were purchased, and those new portables came with the facilities for water. And as part of our costing to the ministry, we look to improve handicap accessibility to the units, and by improve I mean improve not necessarily 100%. And we also put running water in every one of those units. As part of the program, when they went on sites, there were opportunities to add a sink to an adjacent unit. And so we actually added water to some of our adjacent units as well. So we've embarked on a program now to getting running water in all of the portables, looking at those occupied first. And so it's an emerging program that got kicked off in 2017.
Mr. Barron, through the chair, just Just a follow-up question to that, do we have a time projection of how long it'll take to get the running water into all the portables?
We do not yet have a developed plan for actually servicing every unit. Yeah, that's something that planning is working on at this point.
Thank you.
So then fast forward a year, 2018, we had, again, a number of space-related projects that were required to accommodate divisions. Now, when we were accommodating divisions, and Facilities works closely with Learning Services to understand when a division is going to be added to a school that causes a facility space change. Facilities then works with all of the stakeholders to determine what's the best way to meet that facility's need. It could be a portable relocation, it could be a classroom refurbishment, it could be moving other programs, freeing up a space. There's a whole host of different items. There's a computer lab conversion initiative that I want to speak about a little bit. And we do it in two ways. One is when we forecast and know a division is added, we can order that portable or do those changes prior to September. And then sometimes divisions are added in September, the first week of September, and then at that point we do the best we can to find a solution to make sure students get a permanent setup as quick as we can. And so I'll speak a little bit more to the work we've done to get ahead of that process so that students are less convenienced as we grow. So computer lab initiatives. We have a district initiative to use existing computer lab space in schools to help supplement school core space for schools use, multi-purpose space if you will. And then if a school grows by a division in September when we don't have that space in the school to grow, that we use that in a way to provide a flexible space for that division to be housed until we can move a portable or find a permanent solution. And so, for instance, in some cases there was a computer lab in a full-size classroom. So if we take that over as a classroom and we do the conversions necessary as a classroom, then the appropriate portable computer equipment is provided. The school again can use that room for any other function. When the division is added, then we would ask that it be used as a division until such time as we could get a portable on or make other changes. So we've now completed 12 computer lab conversions. 10 of those are created and actually are functioning to be utilized for a division if necessary. 2 are at 100% planning, and we're looking to move forward this year to do those conversions. And 5 are beginning the planning process, and then there's 9 lower priority ones that are remaining after that. I'll pause there actually and see if there's any questions.
Because I can't read it that far away. Can you
That's
please tell me?
design.
Yeah, I know it is. I'm on to you. Can you please tell me the 2 that are at 100% planning?
Oh, so we've got Georgia Avenue Elementary and Mountain View at 100% planning. So there's a few more internal district reviews we needed to do before we actually approve those to be put in place.
Okay.
So they are designed and signed off by the principal.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Keller?
Because I don't understand the learning objectives behind our computer labs. If we're converting lab space, you did mention portable computer equipment, but how are we meeting those learning objectives if we're converting those spaces for other usage?
I think I'll pause and
Thank you.
Sure, maybe Deputy Superintendent Tim Davey might want to respond as well, but generally speaking, we're going to Chromebooks or other portable devices.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'll do the same thing.
Anything to add?
Can I just add a quick thing about the computer lab?
Yes, go ahead, Trustee Higginson.
Sorry, as a parent and as a trustee in the schools, the computer labs kind of they're this funny place where kids get up from their classroom, they line up, They walk down the hall. They go into the lab. They log on. They spend their 20 minutes or their 40 minutes, and they line up, and then they walk down. And so I think it actually benefits us to be moving away from computer labs and into what the superintendent said, Chromebooks and these portable labs that actually allow the kids to have access to the learning, where they're learning, when they're learning, and as opposed to it having to be this other room down the hall that takes up a whole bunch of time and takes away from their learning just to get there. So I think it actually helps us meet our learning objectives. It's kind of an unintended bonus of having to convert computer labs during this time.
Thank you. Trustee Barron?
Through the chair. I hope I didn't miss this, but I'm from both visiting in schools and also from looking on here, I'm seeing that there's lots of diversity in the decisions around what to use these spaces for. And I'm wondering if this process is one with the principal and parents. Is the school involved in the process of deciding how to best utilize these spaces that have been now changed from computer labs?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Through the chair, yes, myself and Deputy Superintendent Davey are doing this as a joint initiative, and so discussions do happen with the principal. When in the past it was principals sort of self-identifying that wanted to go ahead with the conversion. Now we have a bit of a program moving ahead. There is discussion about what the space is going to be used for. There's an agreement made that when they grow by a division, that this will cause them to be able to temporarily house that division, and continue to confirm that they have that plan, that these schools, and that they're aware of it and ready to enact it. And in the meantime, they enjoy the use for that sort of an expanded space for that school purpose.
Trustee Rosevich?
I'm going to pass because it's more about technology than facilities.
Thank you. Trustee Stanley?
Thank you. I'm wondering, why is it a temporary classroom versus a permanent classroom or instructional space? If I heard you correctly, we do this, house them temporarily in this former computer lab, then to put them into portables, or what? Can you tell me why that's the plan versus just keeping them inside the former computer lab?
Yes, I think we'll refer back to my comment about ministry space standards. So the space standards are kind of the guide by which we determine the core spaces that a school can operate out of. Some schools have computer labs that a situation where they can take advantage of this initiative, and some schools don't. So then if you were to decide that the schools that could, if you were going to ask them to use that space permanently, then they would be at a bit of a disadvantage with respect to their core space within the school. I think that also as the pressure grows on schools, as you add portables to schools, as we wait for capital programs, then if we eat away at the core space in those schools, then it makes it more difficult for those schools to operate. But yes, it would be possible for a board to say, we want to use that space permanently and avoid the cost of providing a portable or an alternate solution. It would be possible. But you'd be dropping them below the ministry space standard. Yeah. And in fact, I'll speak a little bit about that because we have done that actually in some cases. Yeah.
Thank you.
So fast forward to September 2019. Now it's not what's happened, it's what we're planning for. And so to speak to your question, there are a number of schools that currently don't meet space standard. So in 2018, we had to use that temporary space, and we're currently reviewing to confirm how many schools that is. It's approximately 8 or 9. So we have already taken that. So they're left at a deficit. So facilities is now looking and planning to see exactly how many schools and bringing forward a proposal to say, does the district want to look at providing a portable and returning them to space standards. What that also does is it puts that school back into a position of accommodating the next division in a temporary basis and having that flex space. If we use this permanently and then we go forward to next September and we're surprised with a division, then we don't have that ability to temporarily accommodate it. So that's another part of the strategy. And so that would consist of new and portable relocations in order, because there are a few portables in the inventory that could be relocated. So that's one step as we plan towards 2019. A second step is to continue with the computer lab conversion initiative to have schools, more schools be in a state to be able to accommodate a temporary division. We continue to develop and confirm our growth plans for each school. In other words, have that principal confirm back that yes, this is how they will accommodate a temporary division if they're faced with it. We continue to develop portable placement master plans, meaning where are we going to put the next 2 or 3 portables on school sites that we see growth down the road. And we're of course prioritizing those plans based on how quickly we see the growth coming at each of the schools. As well, we continue to align space provision considerations with enrollment and staffing forecasts for 2019, meaning that we're dealing with 2018 leftovers right now, so to speak, and planning where we can. However, we still don't know what our enrollments are going to look like. It's not come clear yet. We have some, as George said, we've received our enrollment projections from Beauregard in the last week, but the district has to review those to determine, put in local knowledge and determine what we're going to use for projecting going forward. Then there's a process in the new year of actually converting those into divisions. Comparing those divisions against the capacity, we can determine, do we require a portable again at a certain school. So that works ongoing throughout the year.
No, sorry, I was just reading because I'm having a hard time hearing.
Oh, okay.
Background noise. That's okay.
Okay.
There's construction out there.
Thanks.
So, okay, well, I'll pause there, and if there's anything you'd like me to repeat, or, okay.
No, it's okay.
Okay, thank you. And so now I'll move forward from planning into some of the projects that we're actually completing. And so Hammond Bay Gymnasium, we had an addition to the gym to make it full-size, again, ministry space standards. Construction began in July, and I found out today students started using it yesterday. So the gym's in use, and if I'd known earlier, Superintendent, I would have let you know. Didn't find out till about 4 o'clock today. And that was my response. What? I was very, very excited. Very excited for this.
I have a question.
Yes.
What is the capacity of that gymnasium now that it's complete?
That's a great question.
Oh, good.
I'm not certain exactly, but I believe that it would be able to hold the entire school.
Thank you. All right.
We will know shortly though, because we post a sign up. I think we'll do some calculations. We'll post a maximum occupancy sign. Along with the upgrade, we teamed up the HVAC phase 2. So now the school's completely upgraded with respect to its indoor air quality and heating system. And this school, as you may or may not know, has a heat recovery system. So we actually tapped into the RDN's sewer outfall. And so the idea is that we extract the heat and use that to heat the school. We're still, it's not 100% up and running, but we hope to have it in a few months. It's quite an interesting system. So, Park Avenue, did I skip one here? Park Avenue, we received ministry approval to do phase 1 HVAC upgrade. Unfortunately, when we tendered projects in the summer, a number came over and the ministry allowed us to prioritize the project. We used a bit of Park Avenue's funding to get the other projects going. And then since then we had a boiler failure, which I'll talk about, and the ministry allowed us to use a portion of that funding to address that high priority. So we do have to rescope phase 1 of Park Avenue, and phase 2 will be requested in the 5-year capital plan this June. We did 2 dust extractors. We did the Dover Bay wood shop, and so that was to meet the become compliance with critical safety components. And so some explosion-proof items so that the dust is a safer environment. We also did one at Wellington. We've now done 4 systems within the district. We have 3 more schools to complete and the facility shop. So it's a multi-year program. Cinnabar boiler, yes.
Can I ask a clarification on that? The programs that are not on the dust extractors and the schools that don't have them upgraded, to what extent does that represent a safety risk, or does it? Because you used the word explosion. What is is there a risk level with the current systems there that the ministry, or that we're not able to address, or?
Yeah, there is a risk level, and it's kind of interesting because it's like as information grows, for instance, you're in your home and they determine that the spindles on your handrail are now too far apart and a child can put his head through it, his or her head through, so they're supposed to be 4 inches. And so they adopt a new code that says when you build a home, but you don't have to retrofit your house. So they have a new code, and technically, I guess you don't have to retrofit, but as the district's concerned about it, we've made representation to the ministry, as have a number of districts, and we're saying we want to update these to be in compliance. So yes, there's a risk, and it's kind of the same risk as our seismic program, and I can explain that as well.
So the standards have been upgraded, and so that we are now submitting to
meet those new standards.
I understand.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So it's a midlife upgrade versus waiting for a new school or a brand new system down the road. Yeah, the end of the life cycle of you. While we upgraded the Cinnabar boiler, our energy manager, Rob Lumsden, took the opportunity, instead of duplicating the system, to upgrade to high efficiency boilers. So he's gone with 3 high efficiency boilers, and he expects to reduce the energy consumption of the building just simply on a higher efficiency boiler being reinstalled.
Can you go back one
Yes.
to explain your first bullet and what that is, just briefly?
So we have the ministry's 5-year capital plan, or our district's 5-year capital plan, has a number of components. And I won't go through all the components, but the ministry classifies those components, and they ask that under each component we set a priority. So there's a component called a CNCP program, and my apologies for the 3- and 4-letter acronyms. I do when I try to spell them out when I can. That's the carbon neutral capital plan, and so that's where the district pays a carbon offset amount every year. The ministry actually gives us back by having a carbon neutral capital plan, and districts apply for that funding. And so we had applied for the boiler under the carbon neutral capital plan as an energy upgrade. However, it was our #1 ask last year. However, it failed before the ministry could grant approval. So that's what the #1 means.
I have a question on that. Can you give us an estimate of how much money we've saved in the last year or two in energy savings upgrades?
That is also a great question, and I have just the man to answer that for you. His name is Rob Lumsden, and he's our current energy manager, and I can ask him to bring his Q1 or Q2 energy manager BC Hydro report to the board, and that explains all of that sort of information and more.
Just to add, Mr. Lumsden typically does a presentation to the board yearly about the what's the Challenge Cup. What's that? Energy, yeah.
So we have that information available, and if I can defer that question till I can organize to have Mr. Lumsden on an agenda.
Certainly. Thank you.
So we have a Learning Studio portable refurbishing pilot. And so the previous board approved us to look at a project to construct learning studios. And so in working with staff and stakeholders, it was determined that to take our existing portable upgrade program and take a leap forward, and instead of refurbishing portables to a smaller extent, windows, flooring, take a portable and rebuild it completely. And so that's a program that we have that's functional in the district that we can expand. now we're looking at turning this portable, not just renovating a portable, but turning it into a learning studio. So we call this our version 2.0, and we have a portable at NDSS that we moved from Ladysmith that we call our version 1.0. And so a portable that was previously on the list is unusable. We're going to move one of those to Woodlands. In fact, I think it happens on Friday. And then on the Woodlands site, we're going to completely refurbish that unit into what we call a learning studio to meet our current version 2 standards. And those versions, we call it that, like software upgrades, because if we do this again next year, we'll improve upon it and it'll be version 3. While it's on the Woodlands site, it gives an opportunity for the students in the VAST Introduction to Trades program to participate either as observers or actually in the work on that portable. And so part of the scope of approval for that sees us coordinating with the VAST Trades Department head to make sure that those opportunities are provided either by district staff or by contractors looking at that work. The completion date for the first unit is scheduled for June 30th. The idea is that this is a consideration for a sustainable program, yearly and ongoing, eventually perhaps having the district actually construct portables from the ground up rather than refurbishing. Although, as you could see from the previous slide about the condition of portables, there's probably a lot of candidates to be refurbished out there as well. Options include replacing a poor condition unit with this new unit in the summer. So finding a poor condition unit on a school site, move it to Woodlands, move this new learning studio to that site. School shows up, they have a refurbished portable. And of course, it's a bit of a pilot, so we'll be reviewing it as we go, and there's an option, again, to continue this from year to year.
Trustee President, actually, Trustee Barron had a comment. Oh, okay.
Thank you, Tanya. You go ahead.
I was just asking, so you're calling it a pilot. Have you set out your what kind of criteria are you looking at to determine whether it's feasible to continue it for next year? Or like what will, just out of curiosity, because I think it's something we were pretty excited about the idea of getting students involved and working.
It's a good question. I don't believe we have a set criteria or an audit process at this point. We do have laid out in 2 scope of works exactly what we're trying to achieve.
Okay.
And that could be reviewed at some point during the project, and we can ask ourselves, did we achieve it? And how do we feel about those results, and would we want to move ahead with the program?
Yeah.
Mr. Barron?
Thank you. Did you say that there was some sort of a plan that you've developed that's outlined, a report that we can be provided with that shows us where the portables are, what status they're in, just more information that we could look at? Because I'd really like to have access to more information around where our portables are, what, just portables specifically.
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We have a portable inventory plan that we submit to the ministry every year, and that could be provided to trustees.
Okay. I asked because I think it's great that we're using existing portables and trying to refurbish and utilize existing resources and so on. But I do notice there's a lot of portables in really poor condition in our, as you know, in our school district. And so to see, I'd be interested in knowing the details around when it's considered refurbished. When is it safe for students to be able to go in there, and what's the essential criteria of needs within a portable considered, when kids are beginning to go into those classrooms? Because sometimes I feel like they're put into these classrooms that aren't really up to a great, I'm going to filter my words, but I think looking at the standard of our portables and when it's appropriate for the students to move in, I'd like to know what it means to be refurbished. What criteria needs to be met in order for it to be refurbished.
Yeah, good points. And I think there's a difference between an older, tired portable with finishes that have clear issues, just like a residence that's old and tired versus a refurbished or brand new one. There's a difference between that and health and safety. And so the district is very keen on ensuring continued health and safety in all of our facilities, including portables. So we do address all of those issues. However, I think as you've noted, you go and you look at the exterior of a portable, they're stained, and believe me, we've tried to get those off. And they require other, improvements. So.
Trustee Robinson.
Yeah, there was some discussion a year or so ago about CUPE workers working with our students to duplicate a Victoria project, which is a really upgraded portable. Has anything happened with that? Or?
So this is our version of a step towards what Victoria is doing. So we are looking at having this be a learning studio, not just a refurbished portable. It would actually be sort of a cut above. We're looking at design issues as well as simply provision of function. We're looking at lighting as well. We're looking at like low voltage, like LED variable lighting, dimmable lighting. We're looking at larger windows. We're looking at different finishes, so not only making it a functional portable, but a more pleasing place to be. And so while we're not constructing it brand new, this is a step towards what Victoria is.
Are QP workers working with us?
Correct.
With students?
So this is a board funded, district funded, and construction managed project. So the bulk of the work will be done by district forces, QP forces. And then we will be augmenting where we don't do that particular work or it's required for schedule.
Okay, Trustee O'Neill.
So that was partly my question, but and not so much to reinvent the wheel, because I was certain that there were other districts that were doing this type of work. I guess I still think of portables as a temporary piece, and so when I hear us talking about doing all these refurbishments and rebuilding the 82 that we have in the district, I start to go, well, when do they not become a temporary infrastructure in our school district? And so I was wondering comparatively how it looks in our district compared to others, as in the amount of portables. Like 82 seems like a lot, but then there may be other districts that have a lot more. So have you done sort of that comparison to similar districts with similar student size, enrollment levels, and what they're dealing with?
No, we haven't specifically done that comparison, but we are not considered a high growth district. We do not have the number of portables on our sites that a number of large school districts do. We're not challenged like Surrey or Coquitlam or Asuk are with respect to the amount of enrollment growth and the amount of portables on our sites. I think the school with the most portables at elementary in use was 5. And we do have and I'll speak to that in a minute, we do have ministry approval for an addition to that school. So relatively speaking, we don't have a high concentration, although I haven't particularly studied it, so I don't have the, an analytical review. Yeah.
There's one last question before you move on. When we're talking about upgrades to the portables and the different types of things, water, all of carpets, the actual building piece itself, what about things like Wi-Fi infrastructure and the ability to connect via phone to the school building itself in the case of a threat assessment situation?
So as part of our portable standard now, we do have a Wi-Fi coverage. We have data outlets. We have PA, two-way contact with the school. Fire alarm, all of those types of things. The ministry has a playground enhancement program that they introduced, and they asked the district last year to provide 3 priorities. Georgia Avenue was provided as our #1 priority. At that time, the board had asked staff to look into upgrading the playground at Georgia Avenue for accessibility and inclusion. And so we were in the process, we put that as our #1 and the ministry funded it. So we have a joint project with district funding and ministry funding And the project is completed its initial design, and the tender documents are being readied by Mr. Ross, our planning manager. And we plan to be complete by March 31st on the upgrade. So talk a little bit about seismic. And so the ministry has a seismic upgrade program, and they call it SRG3. So it's the Seismic Retrofit Guidelines version 3. And again, this is one of those items where the seismic code is, the building code has changed, and the seismic forces that are placed on a school building have been increased. The Ministry of Education has a voluntary program to upgrade its schools to meet the new standards. And we're in a bit of a transition where SRG2 is in place and SRG3 has come along now, and that's a reflection of the building code. So our buildings have just been re-rated. And so we had worked this summer with the ministry and 3 engineering firms to review 91 blocks or portions of schools. So a block is a certain age of construction. And so now we have a new seismic ratings for all of our schools. They were supplied to the Ministry of Education, and now the ministry is considering that information and how do they factor that into their overall seismic plan. In speaking with ministry last week, they indicated that this new seismic code has increased the need for seismic projects in the district, and they're attempting to understand how the government's going to respond with respect to funding, and then therefore how the ministry can respond to districts, how to integrate these new needs into the program. Nanaimo is one of the districts. The island has been particularly hard hit due to the code design, the depth, the location, and the magnitude of the design earthquake has put Nanaimo, Victoria, and other island locations as higher risk areas. So there is opportunity in seismic upgrading, meaning that to seismic upgrade, you don't put back the old finishes, you put back new finishes, so there's some refurbishment. There's also an opportunity in some cases with the ministry to revisit the capacity of that school as you're refurbishing it, or to, in some cases, even visit whether replacement of that school is necessary. So there were 2 programs that were in our capital plan the previous year that were in as condition replacements. So one was NDSS, was in the capital plan as we'd like to replace this because the condition's poor, as was Ladysmith Intermediate School. The ministry has been targeting health and safety upgrades and wanting to put more money towards seismic. Condition replacements have not received high priority from the ministry. When we got the ratings back, unfortunately, they went to high at those schools, and we were doing a business case at the time. So we changed the submission to a seismic-based request, not a condition-based request. And so we're working through with the ministry what's the likelihood of funding and either of those programs into the future. What work should the district do between now and June 30th to improve our chances to receive funding? I think because the ministry is shifting gears between SRG 2 and 3, there's a little bit of a lull in their planning process before they get going again with the program.
So, quick question before I get to my main question. The program or review process, I guess, of 2 to 3, the shift in that, when did that occur?
For the ministry, it occurred over 2017.
Oh, okay, so really recently.
2017.
Okay. So I'm wondering, in our shift, given that the ministry is seeming to be more motivated to address seismic issues rather than condition issues, when I think about NDSS and it needing, legitimately a condition replacement argument, if we, to what extent when we switch to seismic, will that affect us? Like, will we just get a seismic upgrade in that situation and they won't entertain a rebuild in that scenario? Is that necessarily the outcome of that shift?
So the ministry asks us to go through certain steps to work through the options with respect to the upgrading of the school.
Yeah.
And so a building like NDSS is quite complex. And so the options vary from upgrading it the way it stands to doing a hybrid option where you might upgrade parts and demolish and rebuild others. And you might phase it in a way that allows you to have swing space, not unlike what we did at Wellington. There's also the option to consider replacement, complete replacement. So the ministry doesn't exclude those options, but they do ask that we do enough work to drill down to ensure that the options are comparable. Meaning that when the ministry decides that NDSS has reached the point in the plan where they want to approve it, and they haven't got there yet, but when they do, they're going to ask to make sure the district has clear studies that show what the cost to upgrade it is and what the cost to replace it is, to help them make that decision where there's a value for money decision in the end.
So we can, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I just want to make sure that I understand that if we're going for a seismic argument, we can still make a pitch for a replacement.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, that's the answer to my question. Thank you.
And I think as the parties go through the process, and it is a hand-in-hand process with the ministry and keeping them informed and getting their advice and working through, I think it starts to become pretty clear in most cases what the appropriate option is. I think that where the ministry and the district act in isolation, and that's where it gets held up. So our goal has been to work very close with the ministry so that they understand our challenges that we're facing, so that they're not surprised by anything we submit to them.
Okay. So actually, I'm just going to stop you there, Trustee Stanley. We have another question, so I have to shift a little bit. Trustee Wilkinson?
So my question is, for now that we switched from condition to seismic, obviously we already have a quote around how much it would cost to replace NDSS, and I can't imagine that would be any different, but is there going to be a whole new set of quotes that need to be, and adding all that up through seismic this time around? Because I know you already have that for condition.
So we do have some costing information that we prepared for our business case. And yes, costing information has a shelf life. And so in discussions with the ministry, they are suggesting that we work now for the next June on items that don't necessarily have a shelf life. So for instance, we might want to look at the geotechnical conditions, the ground conditions under which we might put a new building. That'll give us information about what the conditions are underneath the existing building, which helps us understand what the design solution would be for a rebuild. They would want us to look at the technical solutions to the actual upgrading so that we could better understand the complexities and the disruption to the school. So the more disruptive a seismic upgrade is to the school, the more likely it is it approaches replacement cost. Yeah.
Trustee Kelly?
Thank you, through the chair. So a question in terms of where we're at with our capital plan and when we would expect announcements with respect to funding.
So the ministry provides us with a capital plan announcement, funding letter every year in March. Yeah, in March. So that's when we would expect a response to the plan that was submitted in June. And I've spoken about NDSS seismic replacement, so I'll skip through that one. And I spoke a little bit about LS, Ladysmith Intermediate seismic as well. But it's the same concept as the NDSS. The only difference with Ladysmith is there's a consideration for an option to build on the current Ladysmith secondary site in between Ladysmith secondary and Ladysmith primary, with a new intermediate school, if you will, and also potentially use that as swing space for the upgrading of the other schools. So there's a business case in front of the ministry. Again, a seismic upgrade more than a building condition. That brings us to our current design project that we have at Hammond Bay. So the ministry did approve an addition to Hammond Bay, and they asked us to proceed to the end of we call it a PDR, or project design review stage. I think I've got that right. And we've been working closely with the Ministry of Ed to align the capacity of the school, and in this case, it's a French immersion school. Now, it didn't get approved for an addition because it's a French immersion school. It got approved for an addition because it has the most portables on school site. We put in a draft to the ministry on September 5th, and they came back and asked us to supplement the information in the draft with a little bit more detail around the demand from French immersion, the district program for French immersion, and the demand for French immersion. And in this case, we're actually asking for an increase in kindergarten intake. And they asked, how we would populate that kindergarten intake. And so we're doing that work right now. Along with the draft, they also asked us to look at a previous option that we had looked at in the master planning but discarded. They asked us to look at that again, and that's an option not unlike our Frank Jane, where it's a standalone classroom block. And I'll skip ahead and show you that. And so this is a concept plan where we show a 2-story classroom block where the portables currently sit at Hammond Bay with a link to the main school. And the previous option we were working on was an infill option where we were infilling between the main building and the gymnasium, which as you can see is a little bit more difficult working around the existing building. There's some lost design efficiencies in there as well, and there's a little bit of, there's more disruption in renovation, so there's some seismic implications in there as well. So that option is proving to be a little bit more costly. So it's anticipated that report will be wrapped up and submitted to the ministry before Christmas.
I do have a question on that. Being that we're looking at French immersion demand in relation to that addition request, would that also not feed into our business case around replacement or capacity alongside of seismic with NDSS, being that that's where our students feed into for their secondary years? Like, does that does that relate to supporting that case for NDSS as well? You're referring to the fact that students who attend Frank Jane, Hammond Bay, many of them are drawn from North End schools. Those North End schools, elementary schools, are feeders to Dover Bay. So the more North End students you put in the French immersion program, the more or there's a transition rate to NDSS, which is our French immersion. So for instance, if we increased by 20K, then we might expect that we would see maybe half of those transition to NDSS over 5 years. That might be 50 students that are drawn from Dover and put into ND. Yeah, that was picked up by Tim Davey, Deputy Superintendent, and we're looking at how that might affect the NDSS enrollment going forward. And of course, in the seismic upgrade, when the ministry approves a seismic upgrade, we do have an opportunity to discuss with them what the appropriate capacity for the end result of the project upgrade would be. And at Wellington, we determined that the capacity would remain the same, and then proceeded on that. Thank you. Trustee O'Neill? Nope, well, Trustee Robinson then.
As I recall, in the early discussion, talks, negotiations on Hammond Bay, the ministry's interest in taking on the classroom expansion was encouraged by this board, the previous board, taking full responsibility for the building of the gym, which helped make the classroom thing become reality. Am I mistaken, or is that the way it happened?
It's hard to say absolutely the connections. The ministry has in the past asked for a capital contribution to projects. We initially did indicate that we would contribute to this project in the early stages. During the project development, it was determined that we could break them apart, start the gym with our own local capital funding, and then advise the ministry that we felt that was a contribution towards ultimately, although we were doing it ahead of time. And the impact of that on the ministry, we hope it was positive. Well, we think it was because we did receive the project.
They're taking action.
Dover Bay, we're doing a little bit of work for this. This was in the capital plan. We're doing more development work. There's 3 classrooms in D Wing at Dover Bay that are unfinished, and so we're doing some planning work around diving down a little deeper into construction costs and design to put in this year's capital plan, asking the ministry for funding to outfit that shelled-in area, we call it, as classrooms. That would free up 3 portables on Dover Bay, either to use for growth at Dover Bay and or move to other school sites. And at, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars a portable, there's some savings to be regained for the district. And that brings us to the end. Thank you very much.
We're going to come back to the second priority. It was an early on slide, Park Avenue.
Park Avenue, yes.
So there's been some, I'm just rereading. So you had discussed sort of that there was some funding that we received for that for a number of projects there, but then there's been a pause on some of the projects. I thought I
yes, I did,
come back to that point.
And perhaps I wasn't clear about the link, but some of the funding for Park Avenue, as it was deemed a low priority, was used to make up for the market conditions for where we tendered and we were over budget on higher priority projects. Before we could rescope the phase 1 of Park Avenue, we had the boiler failure at Cinnabar. So we also worked with the ministry to take some money from that project to upgrade that boiler. So the remaining funding will be rescoped. The project will be rescoped with the remaining funding. Yeah.
Okay. Back.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Sable. There's a lot of information.
Thank you.
All right. So that takes us on to 14.2. Have an update from Secretary Treasurer McVeigh around the strategic plan and long-range facilities plan.
It was discussed a little bit during our Director of Planning and Operations, Pete Sabo's report, just with regards to long-range facilities plan, but essentially the announcement is that the Board of Education is working with a consultant to embark on 2 projects, and that is the strategic plan and also a new long-range facilities plan.
Thank you. So it is work that the board will begin to undertake, and we look forward to working on it together and in consultation with all of our communities and our stakeholder groups. So moving on to 15, we have no unfinished business, no new business this evening. And then, so we're just receiving for information items 17.1 through 17.4. Any questions on those? Trustee Stanley?
Regarding, I think it's 17.4, which is the vandalism report. On page 47, actually, and yeah, 47. I'm wondering, I want to request a change of wording, and it's regarding the Rutherford situation. And the words are homeless, broken, and damaged roof, and I disagree and would like to suggest a word change. I think it's inaccurate to characterize it as homeless broken, but rather I think we should state that it's political activists that broke in.
Thank you, we'll note that. So if there's nothing further on those items, I do just want to draw everyone's attention to page 35. We have made our school family assignments for the year. We have Trustee Berzovich, who will be serving the Cedar community, in addition to Island Connect Ed, our Learning Alternatives Center VAST, and the Career Technical Center. Trustee Robinson will be continuing in the John Barsby community of schools. He has some ongoing projects there that have just started this year, and we're looking forward to seeing the fruition of those projects happen. Trustee Wilkinson will be serving the Ladysmith secondary feeder schools. And then NDSS is one of our high schools that has 2 trustees assigned to the zone. Trustee Stanley will be serving as the school rep for Brecken, Forest Park, Gabriola, and Hammond Bay. Trustee Higginson will be serving for Mountain View, Pauline Hare, Quarterway, and Fairview. Trustee Keller will be serving in the capacity of our Wellington secondary feeder schools. And Trustee O'Neill will be serving the Dover Bay secondary feeder schools in addition to international student education. And I just for the public's awareness, wanted to bring up the fact that Vice Chairperson Barron and myself will be attending all of the schools across the district, making various visits, both with our zone trustees and on our own, to make connections with different teachers and see what's happening in our schools. And so far, that's been a really positive experience for us. So we appreciate you guys' permission to assist you in that task. So moving on to our question period. Ms. Matthews, do we have any questions?
Can I just sort of make a point of clarification too for the public?
Yes, thank you, Trustee
Sorry,
Higginson.
it's funny the way that we report out on this chart the ND zone, and it was in the paper that Jessica has ND and that I'll just have the elementary schools, and as much as that would be fantastic for me. I just want ND to know that I also represent them and that we both will work together on that on at ND itself.
Yes, thank you. That's very important to note. Thank you, Trustee Higginson. Trustee Robinson?
Just a quick point that Secretary Treasurer McVie and I will be visiting schools in my zone next week. Her first introduction face-to-face
Lovely.
with the students at her request and my joy.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right, seeing no questions, we have a motion to adjourn. Trustee Berzovich, Trustee O'Neill, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you. So we do have